The American presidential race has taken on a new turn following comments allegedly made by the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. President Donald Trump is reported to have disparaged Americans killed in battle in Europe. The Atlantic magazine broke the story. It said Trump refused to visit an American military cemetery in France because it was, quote, filled with losers. Trump also allegedly referred to Marines who lost their lives as, quote, suckers for getting killed. Parts of the story have been corroborated by other news outlets, including the usually pro-Trump Fox News. But Trump himself strongly denies he ever made the comments.
No, it was a fake story written by a magazine that was probably not going to be around much longer. But it was a totally fake story, and that was confirmed by many people who were actually there. It was a terrible thing that somebody could say the kind of things, and especially to me, because I've done more for the military than almost anybody else.
But whether true or not, the story has angered many veterans and has taken a grip on the U.S. election. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden jumped on the story and had this to say.
President Trump has demonstrated he has no sense of service, no loyalty to any cause other than himself. And if I have the honor of being the next commander-in-chief, I will ensure that our American heroes know I'll have their backs, honor their sacrifice, and those who've been injured will be in military parades.
Let's bring in Chaz Henry now, a longtime national security correspondent in Washington, D.C., and a former Marine captain who's reported extensively on veterans' issues. Chaz, thanks for being with us. How credible do you think these reports are?
Well, so far, Nick, as you note, all of the sourcing has been anonymous. No one has come out and said, you know, I am this person, I was there, and I heard this. But more and more agencies are, as you say, confirming this, but again, with unnamed sources. So we look at trends. So, for instance, in the 2016 campaign, we saw the president berate John McCain for his experience as a prisoner of war, and by implication, other people who had been prisoners of war, undergone torture, saying that this wasn't a heroic endeavor. We saw him berate the father of an Army captain who had died in Iraq. A book that came out early this year said that in early 2017, early in the president's administration, he was in a meeting at the Pentagon with the nation's top military leaders, and at that time he called them a bunch of dopes and babies for being engaged in what he called a loser war in Afghanistan. As you note, Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who has been on the national security beat for a long time, has confirmed, she says, with two, I think these are former Trump administration officials who were on that trip to France, verifying the story that the Atlantic put forward about the president's remarks. So we don't know from a particular source who's come out and said it openly, but the trending would make this potentially believable.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty large trend as you describe it. Do you think, though, given there's an election ongoing, could it have any effect on public opinion in the final 2 months of the presidential race? Potentially.
People have all sorts of things that they think about and worry about and are concerned about as they head into the ballot box. But we know that veterans can look at President Trump and see some things that he's done for them. He's encouraged and signed some legislation that allowed the VA to better hold accountable bad leaders within that agency, created a hotline for veterans if they felt their cases weren't being handled with sufficient speed. And he's built on programs from the previous administration and actually tried to take credit for the entire programs having to do with providing civilian medical care to veterans nearer where they are. So there are things that veterans and people with concerns about veterans and people in the military can look to and appreciate amidst President Trump. But the idea that a commander-in-chief would speak disparagingly is something that would have been difficult for anyone to believe. Even if one thought that the commanders-in-chief in the past were cynical, they would praise and speak well of military people. Sure. In order to ensure that they continue to do what's necessary to secure the national defense.
Let me just jump in.
This sort of thing.
You were a Marine, and just briefly, I understand his alleged comments offended many Marines. Why is that?
Well, the battlegrounds of Belleau Wood are are sacred to U.S. Marines. What U.S. Marines did there was really put themselves on the map in U.S. defense history. Instead of digging trenches, as had been done in years before, and that they had been encouraged to do by some of the European allies, Marines dug shallow holes, and over the first half of June 1918, suffered nearly 10,000 casualties, 1,800 of those dead, fighting in brutal hand-to-hand combat with bayonets. And so to attack seemingly a touchstone of that amongst Marines particularly would be really something that would be strongly pushed back.
Okay. Well, Chaz Henry, thanks so much for that insight.
My pleasure, Nick. Thanks.